I walked into my son's in-laws' dining room, soaking wet, 1 minute early, and Erica's mother looked me dead in the face and said, "Some people have no sense of time." Then Erica added, "She probably took the bus again. It's charming," and smiled. Like she didn't just slap me in front of 12 people. I was still holding the flowers I'd bought, lilies, crushed from the rain, while Mark, my son, said nothing. He just looked down like I was embarrassing him. Again, they had no idea I'd missed their precious dinner window because I stopped to help a stranger at Carson's Market, some poor woman with a screaming toddler. Her baby was red-faced, soaked, inconsolable. I calmed him down in minutes. She hugged me like I'd saved her life. Turns out, I did. And 38 minutes later, that woman walked through the Petersons' front door and changed everything. I didn't say a word at that table. Just pressed my palms together under the linen napkin and reminded myself of the promise I made to Mark. "I'll try, sweetheart. For you, try to blend in. Try not to embarrass. Try not to talk too much or mention anything heavy." But in my mind, Erica's last text played on loop. "Please don't talk about money tonight." Like I ever did. Like I didn't already spend every dinner watching my words like they were glass. That afternoon, I'd stood in my small apartment above the laundromat, laying out my clothes on the bed like I was preparing for battle. Same gray dress, frayed at the hem, but clean. The one Erica once called my signature piece, laughing as she reached for another glass of wine. I had my handwritten grocery list tucked in my purse, $38 left for the week, and receipts folded crisp in a rubber-banded envelope, just in case. Mrs. Ruiz, my upstairs neighbor, had lent me her coat. She always said, "Blue looks powerful on you." I didn't feel powerful. Not yet. Back at the table, Erica twirled her wine glass and laughed at something her father said. I sat there, listening with half a smile. But in my mind, I was somewhere else. Earlier that day, 3 p.m. in my small kitchen, ironing that same gray dress. The iron sputtered a little, steam rising like it always did from the ancient coils. I pressed slow and careful around the neckline. The hem had come loose again, so I stitched it last night while watching old reruns on the tiny TV by the sink. That dress, I've worn it to every family dinner they've invited me to. Always the same. Always just formal enough not to be called out, and just plain enough to be dismissed. I remember the first time Erica commented on it. "Your signature piece," she'd said, in front of her friends. The joke was smooth, pretty, the kind people don't call cruel. Everyone laughed, except me. Downstairs, the detergent smell from the laundromat had drifted through my floorboards, as it always did. It reminded me of work, of raising Mark alone, of budgeting down to the last penny, and never, ever asking for help. 2 years earlier, after my husband died, I packed up everything I owned and moved to Oak Park. I told people it was for the grandbaby, new life, fresh start, all that. But really, I just didn't want to sit in that house alone anymore. Every floorboard creaked with memory. Every night stretched out longer than the last. So when Mark asked if I'd consider moving closer to help a little, I said yes without hesitation. Help a little. Funny how fast a little becomes everything. At first, Erica was warm, grateful even. I'd show up with casseroles and clean bottles, and she'd text heart emojis and say, "You're a lifesaver, Margaret." But it changed fast. Subtle things. Like when her friends from the neighborhood stopped by, and I'd be in the kitchen folding laundry or wiping spit up from the counter. Erica would say it with a soft little laugh. "Oh, we keep Mom busy. She likes to feel useful." Useful. Not loved, not respected, just functional, like a mop or a microwave. One afternoon, I overheard her telling someone that I needed the structure. She's been kind of lost since her husband passed. She needs this. As if I were a stray they'd taken in. They hung a photo in the baby's room, one of those pretty black and white frames with soft lighting. It was from the hospital. I was holding the baby, beaming like a fool. When I looked closer, I saw it had been cropped. You could see my arms, my blouse, even part of my face. But Erica's hair and smile filled the center. I wasn't the memory. I was the background. Nancy, my friend from church, was the only one who saw through it. "You're giving too much," she told me more than once. That girl doesn't see the difference between help and exploitation, but I brushed it off. Because at the time, I still believed proximity was the same thing as love, that showing up every day meant I mattered. Looking back, I realize I was never invited to belong. I was just tolerated, until I wasn't. Last month, I stood in Erica's kitchen, elbow deep in dishwater, watching their baby monitor blink while the dishwasher hummed behind me. There were 2 lasagnas in the freezer I'd made the night before, a lemon cake cooling on the counter, groceries already put away, all without being asked. Not because I had nowhere else to be, but because I kept thinking that maybe, this time, she'd say thank you like she meant it. That maybe Mark would notice that his shirts weren't just clean, they were folded with military corners the way he liked them as a teenager. But what Erica said as she breezed in from the salon and clicked her heels across the hardwood was this: "You're such a natural helper, Margaret. Helper, not mother, not woman. Just some built-in appliance that happened to know how to soothe a teething baby while folding fitted sheets." She glanced around the kitchen like an inspector doing a final walkthrough. Then, satisfied, she smiled, too big, too practiced, and said, "You really make my life easier." Not a word about me, just her life. The fridge still had last week's grocery list taped to it. My handwriting, every letter looped and neat. I caught my own name at the bottom, eggs, Mom likes brown, scrawled in Erica's hand with a little arrow, like a reminder to herself to toss me a bone. I stood there for a long time, my hand still in the soapy water, as she kissed the baby's forehead and opened a bottle of wine. "You could have just told me you were tired," she said once when I canceled dinner after being sick for 2 days. "We don't expect you to be on call," except they did. Every late-night phone call, every favor, every drop-everything moment when a sitter canceled, or Erica had a thing, or Mark had to run numbers for his job. I'd never said no. Not once. Nancy, my friend from church, had been keeping count in her own way. "She doesn't get it yet," she told me one Sunday after service, "but one day she'll see your worth. And it'll be too late." I didn't tell Nancy what I was starting to realize, that maybe Erica did see my worth. She just never planned to repay it. Because when something's free, people stop seeing it as valuable. And I had been giving myself away, one casserole, one diaper change, one silent act of service at a time. The lilies weren't my first choice. I'd wanted the sunflowers, big and golden and a little too loud for Erica's table. But they were out of season, so I reached for the white lilies instead. $6.79. I remember because I stood there longer than I needed to, calculating how many eggs I could still afford after the weekend. Carson's Market was always cold, always smelled like bleach and warm bread. I just folded the receipt into my coat pocket when the sound hit me, sharp, shrill, and heartbreaking. A toddler was crying. No, screaming. From somewhere in aisle 4, a few customers around me sighed, irritated. One woman muttered, "Not again," like the child had done something unforgivable by existing in public. A man pushing a cart full of pre-cooked meals made a dramatic U-turn and muttered under his breath. I didn't mean to get involved. Truly, I didn't. I had dinner to get to. Shoes already soaked from the walk, my coat still damp from the morning rain. But instinct doesn't wait for permission. I turned the corner into aisle 4. There she was, mid-30s maybe, hair in a loose bun, sweater sliding off one shoulder. Her grocery cart was half full, and her toddler sat in the front, red-faced and inconsolable, wailing like the world had come apart. His pacifier was on the floor, covered in fuzz and panic. She was trying. You could see it in her face, the kind of panic you only know if you've been there. One arm trying to soothe him, the other fumbling with wipes. The half-whispered, "Shh, please, baby, please," that barely masked the desperation. I picked up the pacifier and said, "Water fountain?" She nodded like I'd handed her a lifeline. I rinsed it, dried it with the inside of my coat, and came back to her, still bouncing and apologizing to no one in particular. "You mind if I try?" I asked. She looked me dead in the eyes. "Please." I bent down to the baby's eye level, hummed a tune I used to sing to Mark when his teeth came in and the world felt too big, held out the pacifier slowly, gently. Within moments, the crying softened to hiccups. Then silence. The mother's eyes welled, not with tears, just relief, the kind that doesn't come often enough. I touched her arm and turned to go, but she grabbed my wrist gently. "What's your name?" "Margaret," I said. She repeated it like she wanted to remember it. "Thank you, Margaret." As I stood up, I heard my name being called from the front of the store. The cashier, nodding toward the clock. I was late. I gathered my things quickly. In my rush, the bouquet slipped from my arm and hit the floor. A few petals crushed beneath my boot. At the register, the young cashier handed me the receipt with a tired smile. "Happens every night," she murmured, "but not like this." By the time I stepped outside, the sky had cracked open. Rain poured down in sheets. I wrapped the receipt around the lilies to protect what was left of them and started toward the Petersons, the heels of my shoes slapping the sidewalk with more panic than poise. At 6:18 p.m., I passed a storefront and caught my reflection, wet, flushed, clutching a dripping grocery bag like it held something holy. And inside my coat pocket, a rinsed pacifier, still warm from that child's breath, still the only thing I'd held all day that made me feel human. By the time I reached their block, my coat was soaked through. The bouquet was a crushed mess in my hands, petals clinging to the wet plastic like they were trying to escape. I adjusted my scarf, took a breath, and rang the doorbell. Erica answered instantly, like she'd been waiting. Her smile was wide and camera-ready. "Traffic, Mom? Not are you okay?" Not come in from the rain, just that weaponized sweetness she used when she wanted to humiliate me without raising her voice. I stepped inside. The foyer gleamed, warm hardwood, designer rug, the smell of lemon polish and pot roast already cooling. My shoes left small, muddy circles behind me. "I brought flowers," I murmured, holding out the soggy mess like a peace offering. Her eyes flicked down. "Oh, lovely." Mark stood near the hall table, adjusting his watch. He glanced up briefly and said nothing. Not even hello. I wanted to explain. About the woman, the baby, the dropped pacifier in my coat pocket. But instead, I smiled. That polite, apologetic smile women wear when they know they're about to be punished for being late. I tried to reset the evening, like you do when something's cracked but not yet broken, when you still think you can glue the moment back together with a joke or a smile. "I know they're a little wilted," I said, placing the bouquet in front of Erica's mother, "but lilies are your favorite, right?" Her hand barely grazed the plastic. She leaned in, sniffed once, and said flatly, "Gas station lilies? How thoughtful." The word gas station landed like a slap. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came. Just the heat rising up my chest and pooling behind my eyes. Erica was already sliding the bouquet into a tall crystal vase, like she was handling a biohazard, gripping the stems with her fingertips, nose wrinkled in performative politeness. "Let's put these here," she said, setting them off to the far edge of the table, near the window, half hidden behind the curtain. Drooping petals clung to the rim of the vase like they wanted out. I took my seat, the same seat they always gave me, at the far end, near the kitchen door, not next to Mark. Never near Erica, just far enough away to feel it. The waitress, young, quiet, maybe a hired server for the night, refilled my water without a word. She didn't look at me. Maybe she'd been told not to. Maybe she just didn't want to see someone like me, trying so hard to belong. Across the table, Erica's father launched into a story about some investor from Connecticut who owned 3 boats and was, quote, exactly the kind of man you want in a merger. Laughter followed, sharp, clean, unbothered. I smiled. I always smile at the right moments. Learned it from church, from PTA meetings, from a lifetime of making myself small enough to stay invited. But inside, something twisted. It wasn't just the flowers, or the way Erica's mother wrinkled her nose like I'd brought in something rotten. It wasn't even the way Mark still hadn't said more than 3 words to me. It was the way I felt invisible while being watched, dismissed, yet constantly measured. I lifted my glass, took a sip. The water was room temperature, flat. Even that seemed intentional. Small heartbreaks don't scream. They sit at the edge of the table, next to a vase of wet, forgotten lilies, and smile through clenched teeth. I hadn't planned to say anything. Not because I didn't have something to say, but because years of being brushed off, talked over, and smiled at like a charity case had taught me. You wait your turn, and sometimes your turn never comes. But I looked down at my lap, and there it was, the pacifier, still in my coat pocket, still slightly warm, like a secret, like proof. So I lifted my head and spoke. I was helping a woman, I said quietly. Her baby wouldn't stop crying. She couldn't leave the store. I stayed until they were okay. My voice didn't shake. I didn't mumble. I just said it like a fact, because it was. The table paused, just long enough to notice, but not long enough to care. Erica's father leaned back in his chair and chuckled. You're such a saint, Margaret. Always a story. Like I'd made it up. Like I'd missed dinner because I was off rescuing orphans in a fairy tale. Erica laughed politely. Her mother reached for more wine. Mark? Still nothing. That's when something shifted. Not in them, in me. The shame I'd carried in with my wet shoes and wilted bouquet began to dry out, like a rope snapping taut. It didn't disappear, but it stopped being heavy. I looked down at the pacifier in my lap again, turned it over once between my fingers. It was smooth, ordinary. One of those little things you never notice unless you need it. And then it's everything. They didn't ask for details. No one at that table said, that was kind of you. No one said, that must have been hard. They just picked up where they left off. Real estate deals, catered weddings, some story about Erica's cousin's house remodel in Naples, as if I hadn't spoken at all. That silence did something I can't explain. It didn't feel cruel, it felt strategic. A group decision to pretend I hadn't dared interrupt their narrative with something human. But I had, and I wouldn't take it back. I folded the pacifier back into my coat pocket. Not to hide it, just to keep it safe. I didn't belong at that table. That much was clear. But suddenly, for the first time in a long time, I remembered. I didn't need to. I excused myself just after they passed the mashed potatoes. Didn't make a scene, didn't clear my throat or tap a glass. I just stood up quietly and said, I'll be right back. No one asked where I was going. The guest bathroom was down the hall. Small, too white, too perfect. The kind of place where everything smelled like lemon-scented bleach and silence. I locked the door behind me and leaned over the sink, gripping the edges like they might steady me. I stared at my reflection. Rain-frizzed hair, makeup faded, eyes I didn't recognize. I looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with age. A tissue sat in a little silver tray near the soap. I took one, dabbed. Then I pressed it to my mouth, because I wasn't sure what would come out if I opened it. I thought about Claire, the way her eyes had welled when her son finally stopped crying, the way she'd said thank you like it cost her something. I thought about how she held me for a second, like I mattered, like I wasn't just some stranger at the edge of her bad day, but part of the reason she made it through it. I thought about how that moment felt more real, more meaningful than anything I'd heard from my own son in months. I looked at myself in that mirror and finally let the thought surface, the one I'd been swallowing for years. Why do you keep trying to belong where you're clearly not wanted? That question cut deeper than any of Erica's remarks. Because it came from me. How many times had I come to this house with food, with gifts, with hands ready to work, and left with nothing but a sore back and a bruised heart? How many times had I told Nancy, it's just how things are now? No, it wasn't just how things were, it was how I'd allowed them to be. I balled the tissue in my fist and sat on the edge of the tub. For a moment, I closed my eyes. The hum of the bathroom vent was the only sound. It filled the silence like static, numb and constant. And under that noise, I realized something else. I wasn't grieving the way they treated me tonight. I was grieving the version of me who accepted it. I returned to the table at 7:30 p.m. sharp. No one noticed I'd been gone. Or if they did, no one said a word. The mashed potatoes had made it all the way back around. The wine bottle was nearly empty. Laughter rolled softly down the table, as warm and fake as everything else in that house. I took my seat, folded my napkin, smiled like nothing had shifted. But inside, something had gone very, very still. I wasn't angry. Not anymore. I'd passed that exit a while ago. What I felt now was quieter, heavier, like a stone settling into place. I wasn't going to fight for their attention tonight. I wasn't going to explain the rain or the flowers or the child in the grocery store. I wasn't going to apologize for being late or try to lighten the mood with one of my harmless stories. I was just going to sit here, watch, let them be exactly who they were. Across from me, Erica's mother launched into a speech about self-reliance. Something about how she'd raised her children without a single outside hand, and how people these days lean too much on others. Her eyes locked on mine as she said it. No one else noticed. Or maybe they did, but ignored it the way they always ignored things that made them uncomfortable. I didn't flinch, didn't nod, just took a small bite of cold chicken and chewed slowly. I noticed the waitress again, the same quiet girl from earlier, reaching for a pitcher to refill water glasses. Her eyes flicked to mine for half a second before sliding away. She didn't smile, but she didn't look through me either. Mark was talking to Erica's father now, leaning in, laughing too loudly. He looked younger when he did that, like the boy I raised, like someone still trying to earn the approval of a man who never quite thought he was enough. I could have reached for him in that moment, said something small to bridge the gap, but I didn't, because I wasn't here to be rescued, not anymore. Tonight, I was enduring and watching and remembering, because this night, this table, this silence was going to mean something. Eventually, at 7:45, Erica lifted her wine glass and tapped it with the edge of her spoon. "I have news," she announced, eyes glittering. Daddy finally signed the merger with that out-of-town investor, Robert Bennett. There was a pause as her parents exchanged smug glances, and then her mother let out a soft little clap, like she'd just watched a dog do a trick. "Oh, that's wonderful," someone down the table murmured. "Major move for the company," Erica added, looking around for awe. "And Robert's wife, Claire, well, let's just say they're real people of influence." She said it casually, lightly, like it was a compliment. Then she glanced at me. Just a flicker of a look, a flick of the wrist that said everything. "Not like you," I smiled, hollow and practiced. The kind of smile women wear when they've had enough and still know better than to say so. No one else noticed the comment, or if they did, they let it slide beneath the linen like all the others. I stared at the table. My plate was cold. The chicken had congealed into something pale and unrecognizable. I hadn't touched it since I came back from the bathroom. A quiet movement broke my focus. One of the waitstaff reached beside me and gently replaced my plate without a word. He didn't look at me directly, but he didn't look through me either, just like the girl before him. Like they saw something and chose not to ignore it. It wasn't kindness. It was something closer to recognition. The brochure lay on the sideboard now, thick cardstock, gold trim, a bold serif font that read, "Bennett Acquisition Proposal, Q1 2026. Integration. I reached for my water glass and caught the edge of the document with my eyes. A face I didn't recognize. A woman. Smiling, holding a baby. It wasn't Claire. Some stock image probably. Just something to give the deal warmth. I wondered, briefly, what kind of woman Claire Bennett was. What kind of man this Robert must be if Erica's family considered him the kind you drop names over lamb and risotto. I leaned back in my chair, let the conversation float past me like steam from a pot I was no longer stirring. I didn't ask questions, didn't congratulate. I just listened, because now I was paying attention to the names, the timing, the thin layer of performance on everyone's voice when they said opportunity or big things coming. They thought I was fading into the fabric of the night, folding in like a napkin after dinner. They had no idea I'd just begun to sit up straighter, and that this Claire, whoever she was, wasn't done with me yet. At exactly 8 p.m., Erica stood and lifted her wine glass. Her tone shifted, just slightly, from chatter to ceremony. That performative hush settled over the table, the kind that always comes before something rehearsed. "I just want to say how grateful I am," she began, glancing first at her father, then her husband, skipping over me entirely. "This year's been huge for us. The merger, the baby starting preschool, so many blessings." She smiled, the soft kind that photographs well. "And tonight," she continued, raising her glass just a touch higher, "I want to toast to something that really matters, to family, those who keep up." There it was. A quiet thud beneath her words, not loud, not cruel, just sharp enough to find the bruise. Everyone chuckled politely. No one turned their head. Except me. I didn't speak. I didn't flinch. I lifted my own glass with a faint nod, though my throat burned and the edges of the room had begun to blur. Her mother added, "And to those who mean well," like she was tossing breadcrumbs to the floor. I stared into my wine. The stem of the glass trembled slightly in my hand. To them, this was all lightness, harmless ribbing, a graceful way to deliver humiliation under crystal chandeliers and roast duck. But I wasn't laughing. I wasn't even blinking. Because I knew what this was. This was the moment in every performance where the mask slips. Not theirs. Mine. Where the smile I've kept up for years begins to crack. Where the polite nod becomes harder to hold. I swallowed. The wine tasted like vinegar now. I thought of all the times I'd come here hoping to feel welcome. All the times I'd cooked for them, cleaned up after them, said thank you for insults dressed as compliments. I thought this dinner might be different. That, maybe, if I dressed right, arrived on time, brought flowers, even soggy ones, they might see me as something other than an obligation. But they didn't. And they never had. There would be no rescue, no change of heart, no sudden softening from across the table. Just the sound of crystal clinking and people who'd already decided I didn't belong. And still, I sat, I sipped, I endured, because I had one more move left, and they didn't see it coming. I folded my napkin with care, pressed the crease with my thumb, set it down gently on the table beside my untouched plate. Then I stood, slowly, quietly. No theatrics, no speech. Just a single breath drawn deep into my ribs as I whispered, "Thank you for dinner." Mark looked up, finally. His mouth opened, maybe to speak, maybe to stop me, but nothing came. I reached for my coat on the back of the chair. My fingers moved without hurry. I was past hurry, past shame. Erica raised one brow, tilting her head with a smile so thin it could cut glass. "Running off again?" she said, the way some people say, "Bless your heart," right before sticking the knife in. I paused for half a second. Let her words float in the air, heavy and false. "No," I said softly, "just finished." That was all, nothing more. No trembling voice, no accusations, no begging for decency from people who had none left to give. I pulled the coat around my shoulders. The fabric clung to my arms, still damp from earlier rain. Then I pushed the chair back. It scraped across the marble with a sound that seemed to echo more than it should have, a long, hollow drag that hushed the entire table. For once, no one laughed. No one filled the silence. I turned toward the door, my heels clicking slowly against the polished floor, each step steadier than the one before it. I wasn't storming out. I wasn't making a point. I was leaving. And just as my hand reached for the doorknob, it turned. From the other side, the latch clicked. The handle moved. The door opened. And there she was, Claire, soaked from the same storm that had caught me earlier, her hair clinging to her cheek, her coat pressed tight around her baby, who now slept on her shoulder, tiny fingers curled into her collar. Gasps echoed behind me like scattered silverware. And in that moment, everything began to shift. The door swung fully open now, letting in a gust of October air, and Claire stepped through it. Same woman, same tired grace. But this time she wasn't the struggling mother from aisle 4. She was composed, polished under the storm-damp curls. The baby nestled against her shoulder, sound asleep. And in her free hand, she held something small, familiar, the pacifier, still clean, still gleaming under the chandelier light. Behind me, chairs scraped the floor. Erica's father stood quickly. "Mrs. Bennett, we weren't expecting you tonight." His voice cracked a little at the end, like someone suddenly unsure of the script. Mrs. Bennett. That name landed like thunder. Claire's eyes swept the room. Over the table, the expensive china, the stunned faces, and then settled on me. Not a glance, not a nod. A lock. A connection so steady, so quiet, that the air between us seemed to thicken. I turned to look at Mark. He looked confused. Erica's smile had gone stiff at the edges, as if it might split under the weight of its own performance. Claire stepped forward. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said, voice calm, clear. "I was told there was a dinner here tonight. Thought I'd drop by." She wasn't holding herself like someone who thought anything. She knew exactly what she was doing. Erica's father fumbled. "We weren't sure if you were still in town. Robert didn't mention." Claire smiled. "Oh, I've been nearby. Just needed a moment to thank someone." The baby shifted in her arms, eyes fluttering. She rocked him gently as she spoke. "I don't usually take my son shopping, but I was short on time. It didn't go well." She looked at me again, until she showed up. Silence pressed in on all sides. Erica's wine glass was still raised mid-air, forgotten. I didn't move. I didn't know if I could. Claire continued, taking another step forward. While everyone else walked past me, rolled their eyes, this woman knelt beside me, calmed my child, and stayed until I could breathe again. She looked down briefly, then back up. "I never caught your last name. It's Lewis, isn't it?" I nodded slowly. "Margaret Lewis." Claire smiled. "Well, Margaret Lewis, thank you. You did more for me in 10 minutes than most people manage in a lifetime." And then, gently, she lifted the pacifier for the room to see, still clutched in her hand like a receipt, like evidence, like truth. Claire stepped further into the dining room, each footfall quiet, precise. The baby barely stirred in her arms. She turned to face the table fully now, standing exactly where the chandelier light hit her. Not a guest, not an afterthought, an equal. Her voice rang out, crisp as glass. "This woman helped me when everyone else looked away. You humiliated her?" She paused, let the silence settle. "Then we're done." Every fork froze midair. Erica's father, who'd spent the last hour name-dropping mergers, stood like someone just pulled the rug out from under him. His jaw clenched, but no words came. Erica's mother opened her mouth, then shut it again. But Erica tried. Her voice cracked, high, and rehearsed. "Wait, Claire, it's a misunderstanding." She gestured toward me like I was a misplaced purse. "She's my mother-in-law. She can be a little dramatic." Claire turned to her slowly. I wasn't confused. Then she held up her phone. The screen glowed. A photo. Blurry, but real. There I was, kneeling on the sticky linoleum of Carson's Market, arms around Claire's crying child. My gray dress soaked at the hem. My face half turned, soft with focus. Claire leaning down beside me, eyes wide, full of disbelief and relief. The moment no one at this table had cared to hear. Projected for everyone to see. The color drained from Erica's cheeks, her wine glass tilted slightly in her hand. My eyes filled, but I didn't blink them away this time. I let them be seen. Claire stepped to the head of the table, placed a black leather folder down in front of Erica's father, the kind of folder that mattered. He stared at it like it might explode. Claire's voice stayed calm. "That's the finalized Bennett contract. We hadn't signed yet." His hands hovered above it. She slid it back across the table, slow and steady, We'll be going in a different direction." You could have heard a pin drop. Claire turned back to me then, her tone softening without losing an ounce of weight. "No one saw you tonight, Margaret. But I did. I always will." No applause, no music swelling, just raw, real silence. And the weight of every small kindness I had ever given, finally seen. By 8:30 p.m., I was standing on the front porch, the night air finally cool against my skin. My coat clung to my arms, still damp. The porch light buzzed overhead. Behind the door, the dining room had gone silent. Frozen in the moment, Claire walked out and took everything with her. She stood beside me now, the baby still asleep, peaceful against her chest. "I'm sorry if that was," she started, then stopped herself. "No, I'm not sorry. They needed to be told." I didn't say anything at first. I was still processing it all. The dinner, the look on Erica's face, the folder sliding back across the table, the photo on her phone, and now this. Claire shifted the baby, then reached into her coat pocket. She held something out to me. A business card. Simple, clean, gold lettering. Claire Bennett, Director Bennett Family Foundation. I took it with both hands. "I could use someone like you," she said, voice warm, steady. "Someone with your heart, your instinct, someone who sees people when they're falling apart and doesn't look away." I stared at her, not quite trusting the moment. She must have seen the disbelief on my face, because she added, gently, "Mrs. Lewis, would you consider joining our outreach team? It wouldn't be charity. It'd be a gift to us." The door creaked behind us. Erica. She stood in the doorway, frozen. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Mom, what just happened?" I looked at her, and for once, I didn't rush to answer. Claire extended an envelope next, thick paper, her foundation seal pressed into the flap. Inside, an invitation, a job offer, real work, real salary, a real place to belong. I didn't cry, not then, but I did let myself breathe. For the first time in what felt like years, I let the night air fill my lungs and sit inside me without ache. "You don't have to answer tonight," Claire said. "Just think about what you deserve, not what you're used to." She stepped down the porch steps slowly, heels tapping against the concrete. Then she turned back once more. "We start Monday, if you're ready." I looked down at the business card in my hand. I wasn't just ready, I was finally seen. If you enjoyed the story, please hit that like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and let me know which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far it travels. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel and check out my other videos.